On the night of May 31st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 lifted off from Rio de Janeiro, bound for Paris with 228 people on board. It was supposed to be a routine 11-hour transatlantic flight. But just a few hours later, the Airbus A330 vanished from radar screens without a single distress call. How could a modern aircraft, equipped with advanced safety systems, simply disappear? For days, the world anxiously followed the search, as families demanded answers and experts speculated about catastrophic lightning strikes, mid-air explosions, or even terrorism. The truth, however, would prove far more complicated and deeply unsettling for the aviation world. This is the story of Air France Flight 447, a mystery that took years to unravel, involving a desperate search across the deepest parts of the Atlantic Ocean, cutting-edge technology, and a final revelation that exposed critical flaws in both human and machine. Air France Flight 447 took off at 7:29 p.m. local time from Rio de Janeiro, with Captain Marc Dubois and two co-pilots, David Robert and Pierre-Cedric Bonin, at the controls. The flight was smooth for the first few hours. Passengers settled in for the overnight journey, meals were served, and the aircraft steadily climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. But around 2 a.m., as the plane entered a region known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone, notorious for storms and turbulence, conditions began to worsen. At 2:10 a.m., Air France lost all communication with the aircraft. No distress signal, no emergency message, just silence. By morning, when the flight failed to arrive in Paris, panic spread. Air France officials confirmed that the jet was missing somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. Families of passengers gathered at airports in Paris and Rio, desperate for answers. Theories exploded across the media. Could a lightning strike have brought down the plane? Was it an onboard fire? A terrorist attack? In reality, investigators had nothing. No wreckage, no black boxes, not even a confirmed crash site. The disappearance was as shocking as it was mysterious. The world was left with only one terrifying question. Where was Flight 447? Within hours, a massive search and rescue mission was launched. Brazilian Air Force planes scoured the Atlantic, while naval ships rushed to the last known coordinates of the flight. The French Navy soon joined, deploying sonar equipment and submarines. The search area, however, was enormous, stretching across thousands of square kilometers of open ocean, with depths reaching 4,000 meters. Finding a single aircraft in this watery abyss was like searching for a needle in an underwater haystack. Then, on June 2, 2009, 5 days later, hope turned to horror. A Brazilian search plane spotted floating debris. Seat cushions, oxygen masks, a long oil slick, and pieces of the fuselage. Personal belongings, including backpacks and suitcases, were also found. The recovery ships soon brought up 50 bodies from the water. It was the first heartbreaking confirmation that Flight 447 had indeed crashed. Yet, despite these grim findings, the most important evidence, the black boxes, remained missing. Without them, investigators could not determine the cause. Over the next 2 years, several search phases took place. In 2009 and 2010, sonar ships and submarines scoured the seabed but found nothing. The underwater terrain, full of ridges and valleys, made detection nearly impossible. Families of victims grew increasingly frustrated, accusing authorities of failing to bring closure. For investigators, the pressure mounted. They needed answers. It would take one more international effort, involving the best oceanographers and advanced underwater robots, before the truth would finally emerge. In April 2011, nearly 2 years after the crash, French investigators partnered with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in the United States. Using state-of-the-art autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, capable of diving up to 6,000 meters, they began a fresh search. This time, the gamble paid off. The AUVs mapped the ocean floor with precision, and soon, they made an extraordinary discovery. The wreckage of Flight 447. Scattered across the seabed lay large sections of the fuselage, engines, and landing gear. But most importantly, the black boxes were recovered, still intact despite nearly 2 years underwater. The recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The recorder's locator beacons normally last only 30 days. Yet, against all odds, the devices were found and transported to Paris for analysis. When investigators finally opened them, they uncovered the chilling last minutes of Flight 447. The cockpit voice recorder revealed the confusion, the stress, and the struggle of the crew as the aircraft plunged into the Atlantic. The world was about to learn the shocking truth behind the disaster. The black box data painted a devastating picture. At 2:10 a.m., the aircraft's pitot tubes, small sensors that measure airspeed, became blocked by ice crystals as the plane flew through storm clouds. This caused the autopilot to disconnect, handing full manual control back to the pilots. For the next 4 minutes, chaos unfolded in the cockpit. Co-pilot Pierre-Cedric Bonin, who had control of the aircraft, pulled back on the stick, causing the plane to climb sharply. The Airbus quickly lost speed, and within moments it entered an aerodynamic stall, a condition where the wings no longer generate enough lift to keep the aircraft flying. Despite multiple stall warnings, the crew appeared not to recognize what was happening. They continued pulling back, making the situation worse. Captain Dubois, who had been on a scheduled rest break, rushed back into the cockpit. But by then it was too late. The plane was falling at a rate of 10,000 feet per minute. The stall lasted for nearly 3.5 minutes as the crew struggled, confused by conflicting alarms and readings. At 2:14 a.m., just 4 minutes after the autopilot disengaged, Flight 447 slammed into the Atlantic Ocean at full speed. All 228 passengers and crew were killed instantly. The investigation concluded that the crash was caused by a combination of technical failure and human error. The blocked pitot tubes triggered the crisis, but the crew's incorrect response sealed the fate of the aircraft. This tragedy led to sweeping changes in aviation. Airbus redesigned pitot tubes to resist icing. Airlines around the world revamped pilot training, focusing on manual flying skills and stall recovery techniques. For the families of the victims, the findings brought painful closure. For the aviation industry, Flight 447 was a sobering reminder of the delicate balance between man and machine. Airfrance Flight 447 was not just an accident. It was a turning point in aviation history. It showed the world that even the most advanced technology is vulnerable, and that human training must evolve alongside machines. Today, every time a jet crosses the Atlantic, the lessons learned from Flight 447 travel with it, silent guardians ensuring that such a tragedy is never repeated.